Even if people end up being right about Bitcoin who promote Bitcoin, I still have one thing to say. You're still stupid. You're still a bad investor. You got lucky. And even the sun shines on dog shit some days. Paul, you don't understand Bitcoin. No, I understand it perfectly. It's slow. It's expensive. It's manipulated by whales, and it only survives because new buyers keep getting sucked in. That is the definition of a Ponzi scheme. If Bitcoin actually worked or was real money, I wouldn't need to understand it. I would just use it. I don't need to understand fiat currency. I just use it. I know that it can be used to buy goods and services. And guess what? I don't invest in fiat currency. Why? It's speculative. So if fiat currency is speculative, what the fuck is Bitcoin? Guess what? Nobody uses Bitcoin. It's not money. It's not a currency. It's not a hedge. And the technology is definitely part of the future, and it's brilliant. But Bitcoin and other crypto as it is a speculative pyramid scheme wrapped in buzzwords and promoted by the idiots of the world. And when new people stop buying it, the crash will be worse than anything we've ever seen before. The last Bitcoin video I made had over 3,000 comments. First off, I want to thank the smart, principle-driven investors who commented with common sense. For the rest of you, I get it. I'm being aggressive here. But I thought it was funny how you all claim to be independent thinkers, yet here you are, not engaging with a single argument, just showing up for groupthink and high five saying, hey, Paul, you just don't understand Bitcoin. Guess what? You don't understand investing, and that's the problem. What's worse is if you don't understand investing, you're going to do far worse than I will not understanding Bitcoin. And guess what? If you stay to the end of this video, I guarantee you, I will piss you off even more. Guys, first argument to make is Bitcoin is not fully adopted. Okay, Bitcoin's been on 15 years and it hasn't fully been adopted. You're right, it hasn't been. The question is, what will make it adopted? I see on Twitter everybody saying, imagine when everybody owns this Bitcoin. Okay, great. 60-some% of this country doesn't own a home. Does that mean that homes are just going to go up in some trajectory, that's some amazing exponential growth? No, it's still about supply and demand. Now, the other argument is, well, Paul, there's a limited supply of Bitcoin. Great. I can take a in 10 different bags and say, there are only 10 bags of Paul's in the world. Look how valuable it is. But if we have no use for that, it doesn't matter. Guys, you got to remember, Bitcoin is not instantaneous. It takes a long time for Bitcoin transactions to go through. And on top of that, here's the kicker that I love. People want Bitcoin to be untraceable. Guess what? I have no desire for any transactions I do with money to be untraceable. I want it to be traceable so that if somebody fucks me out of money, I can go after them with the full intent of the law. Now, to go back to use. In 1995, 14% of Americans had internet. By 2000, it had tripled to 43%. And by 2010, it was 75%. So from 1995 until 2000, it tripled. By 2000 to 2003, that 43% was probably up to 50%. And guess what? 98% of internet companies went to zero. So did computers. And how many computers went under? So did auto manufacturers. Do I need to show you the list right now of every auto manufacturer who went under from 1900 to today? How about airlines? Here's another list. There are thousands and thousands of auto manufacturers and airlines that have gone under in an industry that absolutely changed the world. And guess what? Only a few survived. Why? Because even though it was still growing, it was all based on euphoria and hype. Bitcoin and crypto was started for things that I truly, truly believe in. But I look at Bitcoin and crypto the way I look at communism. In theory, it's a wonderful idea. In reality, it ain't gonna work. Guys, in crypto, if you have your key and you lose it, you were out your money. Where the f do you want to live in that kind of world where you make all this money, suddenly you die like that and your family can't find your key anymore? Then all that money you worked hard for goes to zero. Why would you want that? We hear stories all the time about people losing their key in a dump site, all these things for what? Next thing is, you always hear people saying, pay me in crypto. I always laugh at that one because all they're going to do is get paid in crypto, pay the normal taxes, sell their crypto when they want to buy stuff, and sell their crypto to people for US dollars to go buy stuff. It's no different. People sit there and say, oh, they're geniuses being paid in crypto. Why? They're still paying tax on that money. That was enacted years ago when the US government said, hang on a second, we want our money when you get paid in crypto or you make money on crypto. Second thing, if Bitcoin is money, why isn't the vast majority of people using it? Guys, I buy high-end vehicles. I buy high-end real estate. I buy a lot of these expensive things. Not one time has anybody ever said to me, Paul, buy this in Bitcoin. Now, could that happen? Could that change? Sure, that could absolutely change. But would you want to price something in a currency that is fluctuating as much as it is? Look at other countries. When they have unstable currencies, what do they go to? They always say, give us US dollars. When I go to Mexico, I have 2 homes in Mexico that we rent out. Whenever we go to Mexico, we get a better deal by paying in US dollars. And the peso is a pretty reliable and safe currency. But there's a reason why they don't price things. Retail is not priced in Bitcoin. The price fluctuates too much. 1 second it's this, another second it's that. It goes up and down 10% in a given day or week. Is that really how you want to buy stuff? Guys, what's amazing is when you buy something on a credit card, you walk out of the store. With Bitcoin, you send a Bitcoin transaction. This transaction goes into a waiting room called the mempool with thousands of other transactions. Miners pick transactions to confirm. Bitcoin miners select the transactions to process, but they prioritize those with the highest fees because they're financially incentivized to do so. It takes about 10 minutes for one confirmation, and sometimes much longer if the network is congested. You often will need multiple confirmations. Many businesses require 3 to 6 confirmations before considering a transaction final. That means a real Bitcoin payment can take upwards of 40 minutes or an hour before it's truly settled. Compare this to Visa. Visa processes, you ready for this one? 24,000 transactions per second instantly. Bitcoin can only handle 7. But what about the Lightning Network? Bitcoiners will say, but Lightning Network makes Bitcoin instant and cheap. The reality is, Lightning is a separate layer on top of Bitcoin, not Bitcoin itself. You need to lock up liquidity and special payment channels just to use it. It's not widely adopted, it's complicated to use, and it's not suitable for large transactions. It introduces new risks like liquidity shortages and custodial wallets, which reintroduce the centralization problems. Guys, it all leads back to centralization, not the original intent of decentralization. Another reason it couldn't be faster is the energy that it takes. Bitcoin mining burns 160 terawatt hours per year, which is more energy than Argentina or the Netherlands use. A single Bitcoin transaction consumes 1,200 kilowatt hours, enough to power a US home for nearly a month. Bitcoin CO2 emissions rival entire nations. It pumped out 65.4 million tons of carbon in 2021 alone, on par with Greece's total carbon footprint. Bitcoin accounts for 0.5% of total global electricity use, yet barely produces 7 transactions per second. Meanwhile, Visa processes 24,000 transactions per second using less energy than a small office building. If Bitcoin were a country, it would be a top 30 energy consumer. And for what? Moving digital numbers around more slowly than your credit card? Not only that, when I hear Bitcoiners say that Bitcoin's a hedge or a safe haven from the market economy. Guys, go look at Bitcoin the next time the NASDAQ has a big up day or a big down day. In all likelihood, it's moving in step with that. That is not a hedge. And the NASDAQ is a highly, highly volatile and overpriced asset. Why? Because the same fucking idiots who would pay 1 billion times earnings for a company are the same fucking idiots who would buy Bitcoin and say it's an investment even though it has no value. And for you people out there who even try to tell me that nothing has intrinsic value, I have this to say to you. Go fuck yourself. You're stupid, you're dumb, you deserve to be poor. That's the thing that you Bitcoiners say about everybody else who doesn't buy into it, but it'll actually happen to you because even if you're right on this, which you won't be, but even if you're right on this, you are going to lose a lot of money in some other speculative, stupid, what you consider to be investment. Guys, 95% of Bitcoin is held by top 2% of the holders. When people invest in a Bitcoin index or ETF, they often assume they own Bitcoin, but in reality, they do not. These funds do not provide direct ownership or control over Bitcoin, nor do they grant access to private keys, which are essential for true possession. Instead, they hold a financial product that tracks Bitcoin's price, often relying on derivatives like futures contracts rather than actual Bitcoin reserves. This means that unlike direct ownership, investors cannot send, withdraw, or verify their Bitcoin holdings on the blockchain. Since these funds are managed by third-party institutions, investors face counterparty risk. If the fund collapses, is mismanaged, or subjected to regulatory action, they could lose everything. Have we heard that happening lately? Have we heard about the fraud? Have we heard about FTX? Have we heard of Binance? Guys, he was supposed to be the mature one in the room, and he got sentenced to prison. Whenever there's hype on stuff, there's always fraud, and you see it popping up more and more. Guys, I know I've aggravated a lot of people here, and I talk about it being a Ponzi scheme. Early adopters benefit enormously while latecomers bear the risk. It's just like Cathie Wood's ARK investment. When it was still 5 times higher than its initial price, the vast majority, the average person was down like 20%. Why? Because the late people get in. And when the bubble finally bursts, they get left out to dry. This is why it's so aggressively marketed like a multi-level marketing scheme on the internet. This is why they say generic things like, oh, you just don't get it. Or, hey, enjoy being poor. You just don't understand. Guys, all the smart people I know who don't like Bitcoin don't say you just don't understand investing. I'm the only asshole saying that. All of them to say, listen, if the market for Bitcoin went away, how would you generate your returns? Now you might sit there and say, well, how is that different from a stock? Well, it's very different. If I own stock in Microsoft and the market to sell Microsoft share goes away, Microsoft's still generating revenue. It's still generating profit. I still have an ownership interest in the company. In fact, look at a company like Alibaba. Alibaba was selling ADRs here in the US. And there was a fear that, hey, if they get delisted, you lose your money. No, you get your shares in Hong Kong. And you still own the money, you still own the company out there. It's still a business that generates money. With Bitcoin, it's only worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it. Just like art, which is purely speculative. Just like the US dollar. But at least the US dollar is backed by the US government and the people in the US who believe in it. Why would it be replaced with Bitcoin? Worse than a Ponzi scheme, worse than multi-level marketing, Bitcoin enables financial losses at an unprecedented scale. I think Bitcoin and fiat are both stupid. They're both speculative instruments. But at least with fiat currency, I can sit there and go to the store and buy gasoline, buy food, all these things, knowing what my money is worth today. Not wondering, oh my God, is my money worth 5% less tomorrow? Is there inflation with fiat? Yes. But guess what? When you price Bitcoin in fiat, what will that lead Bitcoin pricing to do? It'll still be inflationary. It'll still get devalued. And guess what? I'll grant you that fiat's a scam. Let's say that's the case. Does that mean Bitcoin is not a scam? Guess what? Fiat's a scam. This pen, this is the new currency. It's not a scam because fiat's a scam. Does that make any fucking sense? No! Just because something's a scam doesn't mean the thing you're replacing it with is also not a scam. That is absolutely asinine. Less than 5% of Bitcoin transactions show real-world payment behavior. The rest is trading and speculating. That doesn't mean that 5% can't increase. But Coinbase alone holds over 1 million Bitcoin, about 5% of all Bitcoin, proving reliance on centralized custody, 0.01%. That's 1 in every 10,000 wallets control 27% of Bitcoin's supply, more concentrated than the wealth in fiat. Think about that. Most Bitcoin stays on exchanges, is rarely used as currency, and is concentrated in the hands of a few very large whales. So if you think for 1 second that it's some way to make money more aware, more present for poor people, you're out of your fucking mind. Look at El Salvador. They tried to be this haven of Bitcoin. How has that gone for them? Bitcoiners love to scream about decentralization. But then when I hear governments getting involved, how is that decentralization? It is becoming, and to the love of Bitcoiners, one of the most centralized assets in the world because they got f***ed by people like FTX and Binance. Not only that, there's a mining monopoly. 5 mining pools control over 51% of Bitcoin's power. If they collude, they can rewrite the blockchain. Guys, if you think for a second they wouldn't collude, where there's money, where there's financial incentive, and where there's no government interaction, there will be collusion. Let me recap this for you. Over 90% of Bitcoin transactions occur on centralized exchanges like Coinbase and Binance, meaning users don't actually own the current Bitcoin, just an IOU from a corporation. Bitcoin's code is governed by a small, centralized group of developers with disproportionate influence. Calling Bitcoin decentralized like saying Walmart supports small businesses just because it lets third-party sellers use its site. And I love the argument about the Fed is adopting it. Guys, I need to repeat this over and over. Yes, the Fed might be adopting it because they're just like, listen, everybody wants us. JP Morgan, they're doing Bitcoin. What does Jamie Dimon say about Bitcoin? He thinks he's like, yeah, you want to go lose your money on that one? Have fun. So now you want government adoption? That's what blows my mind. I only saw one person on Twitter actually make this call. He said, wait a second. I'm a fan of Bitcoin, but can we all agree that Bitcoin is not what it was originally intended to do? It was supposed to be away from the government, complete government deregulation. Now what is it? And guess what? The same government that took us off the gold currency, bailed out banks, and print money, and this is what you're bragging about after criticizing it like crazy? The second Bitcoin actually threatens them, they're going to regulate it into oblivion. The government doesn't like competition. Newsflash, the government isn't adopting Bitcoin. They're figuring out how to control it. Please rewind 5 or 10 seconds to hear that again. The government isn't adopting Bitcoin. They're figuring out how to control it. And the people out there who love it are the lemmings that they're sitting there saying, hey, they're going to let us do it. And once they control it, you won't be cheering anymore. Government endorsement is often a sign of a bubble, not success. The Fed pushed 0% interest rates and 0% mortgages until it caused the '08 financial crash. In fact, I remember in the early 2000s, people calling George W. Bush a racist for not having less regulation on mortgages. They wanted more poor people to have mortgages. Look what happened. The government backed these subprime loans until they collapsed the housing market. The government pushed forced lockdowns on us, then admitted they were overblown. Remember what's coming out right now about COVID? When has this been a good thing about government? Trusting government adoption as a sign of success is like trusting Enron's accountants. Just because they back it doesn't mean it's legit. The CEO of Enron said this is a $120 share company when it was 70. It went to zero. Now, this is a chart on the volatility of Bitcoin. Can I ask you a question? Is this the currency you want operating your day-to-day life? One day you're worth 10%, one day you're cash. You're going to buy a house in Bitcoin, and 30 days later, when you're ready to buy it, you don't have the Bitcoin available because the price plummeted? Is that the world you want to live in? People believe that there's no intrinsic value for anything. But guys, you're wrong. When a company is able to generate revenue and profit, and you expect a 10% return per year, you can figure out the intrinsic value of the business. What is that for Bitcoin? And guys, don't think for a second I haven't bought things on speculation. I buy art. I buy land that doesn't generate any money. I've bought baseball cards. I've bought rare books. This is all purely speculative. You don't sit there. And in fact, I have watches. And I love when watch dealers tell me, oh, it's an investment. I go, stop. It is not an investment. I love the watch. If it goes up in value, great. If it goes down in value, great. I love the watch. Now, guys, what happens when people are tired of buying it? What happens when a bear market comes in? The most overpriced things will fall the hardest. Look at NFTs. God, please go back and watch our fucking videos on NFTs. Everyone thought we were stupid. Gary Vee says NFTs are awesome. Who are you compared to Gary Vee? Does anybody talk about NFTs? You know what the funny part is? To me, there's way more value in NFTs than there are to Bitcoin and crypto. Because at least in NFT, you have the rights to something. You have rights to an artwork or something like that. You have the digital rights to a baseball card. At least there's something there that you can go out there and sell. With Bitcoin, there is nothing. And guess what? It's made even worse by the fact that there's leverage on it. Over-leveraged investors face forced liquidations when things go bad. Guys, every bubble in history, go look at real estate, go look at stocks, go look at internet, go look at Japanese market, go look at every bubble in history. The tulip mania in the 1600s, 1700s, whenever it was. There's always it's different this time, and it ends up not being the case. Everyone thought Japan was taking over the world in the late 80s, and it took 40 years for the stock market to rebound back to its high in 1987. Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to happen, but on things that are highly speculative and things that are backed and supported by fucking idiots out there, I have a question for you. How is it going to be different this time? I think blockchain is going to be a very important part of our future financially. I think those elements could very much help security for people. But it's not going to be in the form of Bitcoin being a replacement for the dollar, and it's not going to be in the form of Bitcoin being this unlimited value. Ultimately, when the buying stops, the biggest loser will be the person holding the Bitcoin. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be a bunch of people in the room who all want one exit, and they're going to be very hard when somebody yells fire. That's going to be a very, very difficult situation. And once you Bitcoin hypesters lose your allowance from mommy and daddy, hopefully you'll have enough left over to afford a subscription to our software and community so you can learn how to properly invest and not be a fucking moron. So, if this made sense to you, give me a shout out in the comments. If this made sense to you, join our community. $7 for 7 days. Click the link on the description below. And guess what? There are people in our community who love Bitcoin. In fact, I guarantee there are people in this community who are going to unsubscribe from our channel because of this video. And I say, bring it on, because I don't want fucking idiots following us. Thank you for your time.